If you don't already know this principle, let me introduce you to Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law states anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And that applies to a lot of situations in life, and it certainly applies to technology. Because while technology is wonderful and enhances our lives, it's created by imperfect people like you and me. So things are sometimes going to go sideways, so to speak. Now just relax, because we've all been there, either as technicians or as end users. And it's not a matter of if something will happen, but a matter of when. What gives you the strength and you the capability to be effective is to know how to respond in those situations when everybody else, so to speak, has their hair on fire. You can be calm, cool, collected, and focused. It's not easy, but it is so worthwhile. Let's take a look at how to do that.
The first thing is to have a reproducible and defined troubleshooting process. Otherwise, you end up not knowing what particular action may have solved a problem, or you may end up having people repeating things and trying to solve a problem. There's just all kinds of things where people can essentially end up walking over each other, so to speak, in trying to get the problem eliminated. So using this type of process is tried and true and been used in many different settings. To begin with, you need to realize that issues are inevitable. While computers don't make mistakes, the people who program them and build them do. And so because as human beings we are finite, we are frequently going to create solutions that have built-in problems. So you need to realize that components are going to fail, cables are going to go bad, configurations will get corrupted, and service providers, especially internet service providers, are going to sometimes fail. The key point is not if, but when. Even the best designed network and the most profoundly efficient working environment is occasionally going to experience a problem. Now you need to plan rather than panic. Network issues can cause significant distress. End users are not always polite and understanding. Management may put a lot of pressure on individual technicians to try to get things going. But understand that you need to have a rational approach to dealing with issues as they come up, as an individual and as a support organization. So let's talk about this reproducible troubleshooting process and how to apply it. To begin with, you start by defining the problem. I have, over the course of my career, been amazed at the difference between what is reported as the problem and what the actual problem is. To just give you an example, a user may say, the network is slow, and then of course usually followed by, and it's your fault. And when you ask them what they mean by the network is slow, you may find that they're actually downloading a rather large file, and as a result, it's their computer that's running slow, not the entire network. So knowing what questions to ask can actually help you more narrowly define what the problem actually is. The network is slow is too subjective. It's taking too long for this file to download might be a little bit more helpful. Next, you need to gather the facts, kind of like what I was just talking about. You need to interview individual users. You need to ask questions like, is this just affecting you? Is it a specific floor? Is it the whole organization? Is it happening at a particular time of day? I actually dealt with one of my customers that had an internet connection from the company I was working for, and they said that about at 2 o'clock in the morning there was this spike in internet usage. So we did a little investigating, and they later reported back to us that an employee during the night was actually downloading questionable content, and that's actually what was causing the slowdown. So gathering the facts can actually help you narrow down what actual causes could be involved. Next, document the facts. It's important not just to discover them, but to track them. Because if this problem or issue comes up again, you can actually access the information, the documentation, and it will help you be able to shorten the cycle time for reproducing the same type of fix. Next, consider the possibilities. Think of a specific set of symptoms. What could be causing that? Could it be a bad cable? Could it be a DHCP service that has crashed? It could be all sorts of different things just depending on the type of problem, but consider different possibilities that could be causing that particular set of symptoms. Once you've done that, create an action plan for addressing and solving that particular possibility, and then implement that action plan as well. Once you've done that, actually ask the question, do the problems stop or not? And it's simply a yes or no question. If they don't stop, it means you may need to go back and start a little bit again, considering different possibilities, implementing them, and so forth. And if none of those work, you can actually go back even further to the fact gathering stage. But the idea is when you've done this, then you'll have a good idea of what may be causing the problem. Then obviously, if the problem does stop, observe the results, realize the problem is resolved, document what fix worked, and then it's completed. Then obviously, as more problems come up, you can use this same iterative process. The network resolution process that we stepped through is an important tool in being able to resolve network issues. It is, however, not your only tool. There are a number of other things at your disposal that can simplify matters significantly. Let's look at those now. First, you have physical tools. These are used to be able to affect network media and so forth. One thing that you'll find very helpful is a pair of wire cutters or strippers, which is actually here in front of you. It has different gauges of wire that you're able to strip, and if you're creating your own patch cables or doing long cable runs, this can be an invaluable part of your tool belt. Next is a multimeter. Multimeters are invaluable because they allow you to measure voltage, resistance, amperage, and so forth, both for AC and DC type of circuits. And this can help you pinpoint a number of different problems. You also have a cable tester. This can actually allow you to be able to use what's called a tone and probe, or fox and hound as it's sometimes called. You can actually test the cable from end to end, or in some cases, if you're trying to figure out which one of a cable, and for instance a punch down block or something else, it'll actually help you track down the right one. Another very important tool. Then you have a crimping tool. This allows you to be able to actually have RJ45 cable heads clamp down on the cable, and then you can actually create your own cabling that way.
Now, while a common type of crimper is actually RJ45 for actually attaching the heads to the end of the cable, there are others as well. You also have coaxial crimpers that actually put the coaxial ends on the end of the cables. Actually watched a cable installer do that one time. There's also RJ11 and RJ12, and some crimpers you can actually have interchangeable parts to be able to actually crimp those as well. So a variety of different types of these particular tools. Very helpful. A loopback plug is another great tool because it can allow you to be able to close the loop on one end and then be able to do a number of different kind of tests. It can help you with cable issues. It can help you with wide area network issues. There's just a lot of capabilities that it gives you. In addition to the physical network tools, you actually have logical network tools. And obviously, some of this is going to depend on the operating system that you're using. For instance, Linux has its own ifconfig type of commands that you can actually look at and are included in some of our handouts. What we have here are just some common Windows testing tools. For instance, ipconfig. This actually tells you what your IP address is, what your hardware address is, and all sorts of other things. You can use getMAC to actually show your MAC address. And then you have netstat and ping for connections to be able to do connectivity testing. Traceroute actually helps you figure out how far away something is and if you have reachability. Not just regular reachability, connectivity, but actual reachability. And then there's also other things like your ARP cache and Windows version number that can be very, very helpful. Another very important tool that I have seen left out of many equations, so to speak, are issue tracking systems. The internet service provider that I worked at did not have any sort of tracking system. And what I'm pretty sure happened on many occasions is that a user would call in with the same problem they'd had the day before, and they didn't realize what the problem was. They also didn't realize that maybe the reason that the customer didn't have service anymore is because they hadn't paid their bill for 3 months. Or there was some kind of recurring equipment problem that they didn't pinpoint because they weren't keeping track of anything. So issue tracking systems are essential. Manage Engine Support Center actually has a great set of ticketing systems that I've actually been able to use in a number of different types of courses that I've taught over the years. Now, an issue tracking system can be called a trouble ticketing system, or TTS. It can be called an incident ticket system, or ITS, or even just a support ticket system. But the general purpose here is to manage the process of issue resolution. There are a number of different types that are available. You can assign things to technicians this way. BMC has one. Fit Tracking Systems is another. Issue Track is another. I really like the Manage Engine Support Center Plus. There's even a free version that you can use up to, I forget how many incidents and stuff like that. And there's another freeware utility called SpiceWorks that actually helps with network management. So that's another option
when looking at different types of packages. There's also another type of network management methodology called ITIL, I-T-I-L. It actually stands for IT Information Library. It was actually developed in Great Britain and has become rather popular. You'll actually see a lot of different standards in relation to that. It's more along the lines of establishing a service and how you deal with components of a service and so forth. But it's something else you might run into, and certainly something that really gives you a great idea of how to be able to track these different types of system so that you don't lose collective knowledge once you've solved a problem.
Network issues and outages can actually cause a great deal of stress, not only to end users or technical staff, but anyone else that may be supporting them. And I wanted to relate a personal story to you in this regard. I was actually in Southern Oregon working on a load balancer project. And while I was configuring the devices, they were supposed to be working together, one of them decided to stop working. And unfortunately, it brought down a main section of their production system. Well, the engineer on staff there came up to me and said something very casually like, "I think there's a problem. Maybe you might want to look at it." Kind of like, "How's the weather?" and "How do the Mariners do?" or something just very casual. I had no idea there was a big problem going on, just that something needed to be corrected. I continued to work at it in the same pace that I had for about another hour or two, and he came up and asked again in the same sort of casual tone. Finally, at about 3 o'clock, he came back with the words, "My vice president is furious, and he wants to know right now when this will be fixed." The problem in that situation is that that particular engineer had never communicated the urgency of that particular situation as I was working on it. Otherwise, I certainly would have been a lot more aggressive in solving the problem. I eventually had to strip out the configuration, set everything back to baseline, and bring things back up. But that cost me dearly with this particular customer. I attempted to repair the relationship, and they still managed to take everything personally. I just relate that story to let you know that when network issues come up, and inevitably they will, it's going to happen. And you're sometimes going to have rough experiences with it, but you can make it through if you just keep a calm head and learn from the experience.
So let's look at a couple key terms from the things that we've talked about. First, a loopback plug. This is an RJ45 connector wired to assist in testing connectivity to a network adapter, such as an Ethernet NIC or network interface card. Plugging the loopback plug into the jack will allow you to be able to tell if that adapter is functioning correctly. Then there's ping. Ping is actually an acronym for Packet Internet Groper, and it's a network test utility used to verify connectivity. It can tell you whether or not there's connectivity between whatever your workstation is that you're using and the one that you're trying to reach. Next, there is traceroute, and this is a network test utility used to verify reachability. Ping tells you whether or not you have connectivity. Traceroute tells you what path network traffic is taking to get to that destination and if it's reachable or not. And then you have an incident management system. This is typically a software-based package and which is a tool used for documenting the problem resolution process.
As I mentioned before, it's not a matter of if problems will happen, but more of when they will happen. One of the greatest weapons in your tool belt, so to speak, as an engineer is to have a framework for problem solving, being able to identify, correctly resolve, and then document whatever it is you happen to be dealing with. So following through this framework will save you a lot of time and proverbially stomach lining as well. One important thing I want to tell you just from experience is don't take these kinds of things personally. It's not about you, it's usually frustration within a situation. And by being able to have that type of professionalism and keeping a cool head, you will be worlds above so many other people in the profession, and you'll be able to distinguish yourself.